Hey guys, welcome to LALoveCreative. Today we're talking about crop sensor versus full frame and also my thoughts on the Fuji X-T3 during a fashion shoot. Cue the intro. Now, I recently had a chance to shoot the Fuji X-T3 again in an actual fashion shoot. My first initial video of this camera was a little bit more of just a review on different specs, autofocus, stuff like that. This was my first time actually shooting a model with this camera. Now, if you're new to full frame cameras versus crop sensors, basically full frame cameras utilize their whole sensor and are more closer to the 35mm equivalent, which is the film equivalent, which is kind of like the industry standard. So when it comes to full frame cameras, there are a couple advantages. Usually they're better in low light, usually they're closer to film, and usually they have more of a shallow depth of field. With a crop sensor camera, you're getting a crop. I know, groundbreaking. Broke that down to, you heard it here first. Crop sensor cameras, crop. But what that actually means is that when you put a lens on a crop sensor camera, like the Fuji X-T3, and in this case, I had a 50mm lens for this camera, that 50mm lens is really a 85mm lens due to the 1.7 times crop that the Fuji has. Now, is that a deal breaker for a lot of people? No, there's actually a few workarounds for that. You can get a Metabone speed booster to make this camera more of a 35mm equivalent, which is awesome. However, they cost like $500, $600. So there's that. Ultimately, a full frame camera is probably going to do better in low light than a crop sensor camera. However, a lot of the new cameras coming out are going hard. They are just going so hard in the paint. Man, they are just, And a lot of them are handling low light pretty well. The Fuji X-T3 is a great camera. Low light sensitivity is not the best, but it's not bad. It's pretty decent. One of the benefits of a crop sensor camera would be it's lighter. Ultimately, a lot of full frame cameras are bigger, bulkier. The Fuji X-T3 is a great size. It's a great camera for traveling. Another benefit of a crop sensor camera is it could be a negative or it could be a positive, it could be either one, is the fact that there's a crop. So if you're using, let's say, a 300mm lens on a crop sensor camera, that 300 could be now like a 450 or something like that. So if you know the hurdles of how to deal with a crop, then you can actually use that to your advantage and get more of a zoom out of your lenses. Now, the main thing I think most of the people that are looking at full frame versus crop sensor, we all want to know about the blurry background. We want to know about the depth of field. We want to know, is it going to be blurry? What about the bokeh? What about the bokeh? One thing that I have to mention that a lot of photographers forget when it comes to crop sensor versus full frame is apertures are not the same. So just like your 50mm on a Fuji X-T3 becomes more of like an 85mm, your aperture also shifts as well. A f.2 is more of like a f.4 on a full frame. That is not a big deal. That is a good amount of blur in my opinion. But if you're looking for a full frame equivalent when it comes to bokeh and blurry backgrounds, your crop sensor camera is not going to give you that. So you need to take that in consideration and get faster glass or use a speed booster. One of the things I don't really like about the Fuji, which is, it's not terrible, but the autofocus on this camera is okay, it's good, but it's not the level of Sony or Canon. Right now it seems like autofocus is going dual pixel, autofocus, Canon, Sony, and then everything else, which is not bad. I think the Fuji is capable when it comes to autofocus in videography and in photography, but I felt it was a little slower than my Sony a7 III or Canon cameras that I've used in the past. Now, do I want a Fuji X-T3? I think for the price point, I think the specs, the codecs that this camera can actually shoot in. That's one thing that the Sony cameras I wish they would get on board with. But at the same time, I think I prefer a full frame look. I like having a lens, putting it on my camera and being like, that's the lens it is. Like, oh, it's a 50? Well, it's a 50. And I don't have to do any math. I suck at math, y'all. But that's all I have to say about the Fuji X-T3. If you have any questions about videography or photography, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time. See you later.